Hi everyone, I'm Dale Smith, aka Journo Dale, and we're here to talk about Canadian politics. A week ago, a conservative senator tabled a bill in the Senate that would strip the former Governor General, Julie Payette, of her pension going forward and strip any former Governor General who didn't serve 5 years of their pension, which is a really problematic bill. And it's something that all of the discussion around this completely ignored through most of the week. I think we had a whole singular news column that pointed out that there are significant problems with this. And I figured we should take a kind of a trip through why this matters and about the real issues around institutional independence and why we have legislative protections against, for the salaries and pensions and benefits of these particular officers or appointed positions or so on. And we're talking here about senators, we're talking about governors general, we're talking about Supreme Court justices, and even officers of parliament. They all have their salaries and pensions and so on protected in legislation in order to prevent a government of the day from trying to exert influence on them. And this is important because a lot of these positions are capable of having some kind of effect on holding a government in check. If it's the Senate, they have an absolute veto on legislation short of constitutional amendments. For Supreme Court justices, they can obviously strike down any piece of legislation that they see fit. Officers of Parliament have roles in terms of holding government to account and, can put out really embarrassing or damaging reports. The Governor General can obviously not sign bills if they are particularly egregious and unconstitutional. It's almost never happened in recent history, but again, these are powers that exist for a reason. And for a piece of legislation to come around and make the case that we should be able to withhold pensions or benefits or affect salaries of these offices should be an alarm bell, because we need to ensure that that their institutional independence is protected. And the moment that we start going after these, what makes their pensions, their salaries, and so on, is an invitation for future governments to start using this to exert influence. Now, it is very difficult for that to happen because being legislation, it has the opportunity to be defeated by the Senate or so on, or struck down by the courts if it's found to be egregious. But again, the fact that a government could try and influence someone who has a check on their power by way of trying to threaten their livelihoods is problematic. And this is one of the reasons why I was so discouraged this last week over the kind of discussion that was going on, is because everyone was focusing on this very populist narrative of, yes, it's good politics to go after someone. And yes, Julie Payette was a very problematic individual in the job, and it does have a kind of bit of, a sense of seeming unfairness in that she will be able to collect her pension after only 3.5 years in the role. However, it's twofold. One, this is the price we have to pay for her going quietly, which we should be thankful that she went quietly and did not cause a constitutional crisis or force us to go to the Queen to seek her dismissal. So that's part of it, but it's also we also have to remember what we are asking these people to give up in terms of their whole lifestyles when we appoint them to these offices. And there, people like to make it seem like they are fairly cushy or extravagant, but they're really not. I mean, this is Canada, and we are a miserly, cheap country. So anything that may seem the faintest bit opulent really isn't. It's we pinch those pennies pretty hard. So you were really asking these people to give up a whole lot, and there's not a lot of upside to it aside from public service. So this is just one of the things that I think we need to just keep in mind when we see these kinds of populist narratives around these kinds of positions. I mean, the Bloc have put forward a bill that would make the Governor General's salary $1 a year. The NDP had previously suggested that senators should be volunteers. All that those kinds of measures do is just ensure that we only have independently wealthy people seek these high offices, because that's the only way that they could actually afford to live on doing them. And that's not good for, a representative kind of, democratic, but also just a system by which, we are trying to encourage broad participation in these kinds of roles. It is appropriate for monarchy that you have an independently wealthy family who, exercises the powers of head of state, because again, that ensures their independence and that they are isolated from the government of the day trying to exert influence over them through financial means. But again, that's one case instead of any of these other positions. And again, that kind of leads to their own sort of institutional independence as well. It's that kind of insulation for means by which the government would try and influence them. These same kinds of considerations for institutional independence are also why it's difficult to fire people in these roles, be it senators or officers of parliament or the governor general. That's why there was a lot of consternation around when all of this stuff was coming out about Julie Payette, about how do we get rid of her, because the first rule of constitutional monarchy is you do not bother the Queen. And this is one of those situations where we would have had to bother the Queen if she dug in her heels and didn't want to go. So we should, anytime these kinds of bills come forward, these kinds of propositions are thrown around, and everyone starts talking in a, excitedly populist fashion about what great politics this kind of bashing is. We need to take a step back and think and realize why these positions have the protections they do in legislation, and why they have the kind of insulation that is around them to protect them against governments of the day who may wish to exert influence in inappropriate ways. These are important safeguards built into our system. These are ways in which we kind of keep a check on some of the worst constraint, or the worst excesses of mob rule, as it were. And they're integral into making a liberal democracy like ours work. So yeah, next time these kind of bills come around, let's exercise a bit more thought and call out these kinds of problems for what they are, because it's really alarming that an attempt to erode the institutional independence of the Governor General was basically being applauded by pundits across the country, barring one. So yeah, let's keep all this in mind and call it out the next time it happens. And that's everything for this week. Join us again next week for some more Canadian politics. I'm Dale Smith. That's at journo_Dale on Twitter. And don't forget to like the video, share, subscribe, and support us on Patreon. Thanks, everyone.